Well, hey, everybody. My name is Kat. I am a grateful believer in Jesus. I struggle with worry and grief. And I'll go ahead and say, I know it's been a minute. We were out a little bit, and we'll go ahead and clear it up now. Brian and I did not go to Bethel. So for all the questions, I think half the people in the room asked me at one point. We're here to stay. It was football. So y'all have to give us a little bit of grace. So tonight we are continuing in the power of honesty. So we're in step 4. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And our verse is Lamentations 3:40. Let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. You know, when I was thinking about tonight, when I was thinking about this step talk, I was also thinking, like I'm sure a number of you are, about the holidays. I had a chat with a friend of mine right before this, and I think we both agreed that if one more person says, "Are you ready for Christmas?" I may lose it. You know, I have always loved the holidays, and when I say holidays, I mean everything from Thanksgiving through Christmas all the way to New Year's. That month or so has always been one of my favorite times of year, but it's really this kind of unique combination of like nostalgia and all of those past Christmas memories, sort of mixed in with the desire to make new memories, right? And to try to focus in on the now. And one of the things I was really thinking about, it kind of hit me this week, was how different this time of year is now as an adult than it was when I was a kid. And I was thinking about all the things that I loved about it being a kid, because to be quite honest, it was easier and a whole heck of a lot more fun. Like, I remember the whole get out of school thing, right? It's like 2 to 3 weeks where you got nothing to do. There's no homework. You get to sleep in. You can hang out with your friends. I mean, work's not shutting down like that. I remember one of the other things that came to mind, this may sound a little weird to you guys, but as a kid, I loved the whole like food and candy and snack situation. Yeah, thank you. So the way I grew up, and y'all, this is a safe place, so don't judge me, but the way I grew up, my family was, we weren't like crazy health conscious, but I was a kid that thought that the cool snacks to have at the party was a veggie tray. You will still find a veggie tray at my parties. So when Christmas came around, it felt like we spent a month, and there was always somebody like making a pie or cookies. There was candy in the house. There was never candy in the house. I mean, even now I feel like when like December 1st gets here, I have to go to Walmart and buy that giant bag of red and green M&Ms and put them on a jar on the counter, because something about that says like, yay, now it's Christmas. I remember the movies and the TV shows. And this was back in the day, so nobody was streaming anything on Netflix, y'all. This is TV. We didn't even have cable. You know, you had like the 5 or so networks. You had your little antennas, right? Getting that? So right after Thanksgiving, my parents would bust out that TV guide, and you'd figure out what nights all of your shows were coming on, right? So you could plan for that. And you had all your claymation ones. So we had Rudolph and Frosty, Santa Claus is coming to town, Little Drummer Boy. Y'all know this? Yeah. Don't act like you're not still watching them. Yeah. And you had the classics, right? Like Home Alone. You had to hit that up. And my personal favorite, A Charlie Brown Christmas. Because it's not Christmas until you watch A Charlie Brown Christmas. I remember, oh my gosh, my parents were, if you could go overboard on something, my parents will do that. And that meant Christmas too. I remember all of like my Santa prep, like the visiting Santa, and I wrote letters, and I mailed letters, and I took a written letter when I visited Santa, just in case the mailed letter didn't make it all the way, right? Like you had to have this backup, make sure that this went through. I remember Christmas Eve making cookies and decorating cookies and putting out milk. And I was real big on the reindeer, right? So we had reindeer food outside and carrots because I felt like they were doing all the work, right? They weren't really getting a lot of recognition. There was so much about Christmas I loved. We always went and saw the Christmas lights. Any Meadow fans, right? There's my Joco people. There we go. All right. Because it's not Christmas until you stand in line for 2.5 hours in the cold to ride this little train. To see the lights that you can see while you stand by the fence waiting for the little train. And if you wait until after like mid-December, then you go in there to get candy and everybody's picked over all the good candy. But you still have to go to Meadow because it's not Christmas without the Christmas lights. I remember church with my grandma. It's a little tiny little country church. And I remember hearing the Christmas story, and it didn't sink in as a kid. Like I couldn't fully embrace what that meant. But even then, you kind of remember that feeling, right? There was kind of that sense of awe. I loved being a kid at Christmas time. And the strongest feeling I remember is that sense of anticipation, right? That something was coming. There was something to look forward to. And December was the longest month on the calendar. We would get our tree out the day after Thanksgiving. And for the rest of you heathens, that is when you take your tree out because it does not come out before Thanksgiving. We will talk later, Tisha. But we would get our tree out and we'd get out the Advent calendar. You know what I'm talking about? Where you started on December 1st. I think it's mean that you can't start before December, but you started on December 1st and each day you would move it. And I'd run down the stairs every morning I'd run down the stairs every morning and fight with my brother to be the one that moved it. But somebody was going to move the little box over to the next date. And I remember feeling like Christmas was never going to get here. And you waited, and you waited, and there was just this sense that something was coming. As an adult now, it's different. You know, I still love this time of year, but I don't tend to approach it with the same excitement and anticipation. The best way I know how to describe it is that as an adult, there's a weight that I didn't feel as a child. And I know I'm not the only one. You know, I recently read a study. They did a survey of U.S. adults, and almost every one of us, 89%, said there was some concern causing extra stress around the holiday season. And for almost half of it, it was enough to interfere with our ability to even enjoy it. And I was going through the list of that, and I was like, you know, this all feels pretty familiar. The number one that people reported, spending too much money or not having enough money to spend. We have convinced ourselves that Christmas joy is something that we have to buy, and we can only have as much as we can afford. Right on the heels of that was finding the right gift, because apparently we don't really believe it's the thought that counts. What's in that box is really critical to our Christmas spirit. One that hit me pretty hard was that missing family or loved ones. Grief's a big one. 3 years ago, I lost my dad the day before Thanksgiving. And I've struggled since then to find that same joy in this season. I've always felt like the holidays won't look quite the same. There's always something missing. A lot of us say that our stressor comes from having too much to do. So not only do we not have enough money, we don't have enough time. I mean, we're not, all that extra time we had as kids, where did that go? We have a million places to be, a million things to do, and we're already late to all of them. I mean, does anybody else feel like it was June like 10 minutes ago? Like December doesn't last very long anymore. I swear I blink, I wake up, it's Christmas, it's over, and I'm still not ready. We feel a pressure to make the holidays special, obligations. I think back about all those things that I listed that I loved about Christmas when I was a kid, and seeing the lights and making the cookies and going to grandma's and all this, and it occurred to me, who is making that happen? Me. I'm the adult now. There aren't Christmas elves coming out of the woodwork making all these wonderful things come true. Those obligations and those stressors are on me. Food and alcohol related issues. All of a sudden, all that food and all those parties aren't as much fun when we're an adult that's struggling. And the list goes on and on. Isolation, travel stresses, family conflict. You know, when asked, most adults had trouble describing their feelings around this time of year without using both a positive and a negative. We'd say we were joyful, but we were also overwhelmed. We'd say we were happy, but we were also stressed. And in that same study, it went on to talk about something that most of us in the room are very familiar with, which was coping mechanisms. And it talked about healthy coping mechanisms, right? Reaching out, talking with people. Talked about how many of us fall into unhealthy coping mechanisms, isolation, substance use, anything to deal, right, with the stress. And we could talk about healthy coping mechanisms. These are good things. These are good tools to have in your recovery toolbox. But when I was thinking about where I wanted to take that tonight, I thought, I didn't feel right. I don't feel like I want to stop there. Because I didn't want us to focus on this time of year being something to cope with. Just something we're going to make it through. What if we tried to find that joy again? That wonder, that anticipation. Like, what if we could tap into that? And what if instead of gritting our teeth and just getting to the other side of it, we could really celebrate Christmas? And instead of seeing this season and everything that comes with it as a threat to our recovery, what if we could see it as an opportunity to grow in our recovery? See, when I look at all these stressors, when I read about all these concerns that are weighing us down, at the heart of every single one of them is expectations. And expectations are all tied up in relationships. Relationships are what make the holidays so incredibly special. They also happen to be what make the holidays so incredibly hard. Relationships are hard because they are full of expectations. Expectations others have of us, expectations we have of others, and expectations we have of ourselves. And often these expectations are unrealistic, they're unreasonable, or they're unhealthy. And the holidays, with all that closeness and togetherness, tends to expose the expectations in our relationships. So our core question tonight, this is what I want you to think about, and this is what I want you to ask yourself. What unrealistic expectations, my own or others, are keeping me from fully embracing the joy of this season? We're going to have a little activity first. I want everybody to close their eyes. Most of us have an expectation of what Christmas should look like. And I want you to visualize that. What are your expectations of Christmas? What are you doing? What are you doing Christmas Eve? What are you doing Christmas morning? Where are you? Who's with you? What does it look like around you? What does it smell like? Maybe like me, what you visualize is based on your childhood memories. Or maybe you didn't have a great childhood, so it's based on what you wish it had looked like. Or maybe those expectations are based on a movie you've seen, a book you've read, a friend's experience you know about. Everybody got our picture? You can open your eyes. I want you to hold that. I want you to think about that as we go through this. And see, we all have expectations. We all have a picture in our head of what things should look like, and reasonable expectations are fine. It's good to work toward goals. But here's the issue. That picture you just came up with in your head, that doesn't look like the picture the person next to you came up with. And many times it doesn't look like the same picture your spouse or your kids or your extended family or your in-laws or your friends have in their head. And conflict comes up. Stress comes up in our relationships when our expectations are in direct conflict with the expectation of those around us. When what we want, what we envision, doesn't match what they want. Anyone who has extended family has experienced this at one time or another. I remember as a young adult, when I first got married and I first had a family, when I first experienced this, I had a vision of what I wanted Christmas to look like for my kids, for my family. And it was in direct conflict with what was expected of me. And when I explained what we had decided was important to our family, then I was told that I was hurting their family. See, when you challenge someone's strongly held expectations, sometimes the response that you're going to get isn't so hot. And that is where the lie of codependency tries to creep its way in. That we have to do this thing, whatever this is, whatever this person expects to make them happy, to meet their expectations, even when it is a direct violation of maybe what we want or what we should do. Oftentimes we go along, we agree because we don't want to be the problem. We don't want to rock the boat, or God forbid, be the one that ruins Christmas. But what happens when we do that? When we do things we don't want to do, that we shouldn't do, when we are pulled into other people's expectations over and over and over again, stress starts building. We start dreading the holidays. We start resenting people. We start missing out on the things that we should be doing with our families. And if it goes on long enough, it will start to impact your physical health, your mental health, because instead of focusing on what Christmas really means, we spend our time being miserable, trying to meet the expectations of other people. You see, the truth is, guys, you're not a character in someone else's Christmas play. And you were not made to meet someone else's expectations. Every one of us is responsible for our own expectations. So what did I do? Well, I would love to tell you I have the perfect words, and if you'll say this right here, they'll understand, it'll all be perfect. I don't have those for you. That's not what happened, because life is not a Hallmark movie. It wasn't received well. But here's the thing, guys. You're not responsible for how it was received. You're responsible for how it was delivered. I'm responsible to communicate kindly. I'm responsible to communicate in love, and I'm responsible for telling the truth. I'm not responsible for what someone does with that. If you want to release the stress of others' expectations, we've got to let go of the lie of codependency. But step 4 is about being honest with ourselves. What about our own expectations? What about when we're the ones putting unrealistic, unreasonable, or unhealthy expectations on ourselves or others? You know, I kind of break it out this way. The unrealistic expectations, for me, those tend to center around our resources, right? Spending money we don't have on things we don't need in search of that elusive right gift. You know, when I was a kid, I remember the joy of opening presents, right? Seeing a stack under the tree, getting really excited about what it might be, unwrapping them, all the excitement. And I got to thinking about it. I'm like, as much as I remember that feeling and enjoying it, I don't know that I could tell you one thing I actually unwrapped. Because it wasn't about what was in the box. And I certainly couldn't have told you what it cost. It was the people around me. It wasn't the things. What unrealistic expectations have we created around our money and the Christmas that it can buy us? The other resource that we have unrealistic expectations around is our time. We commit to, we plan activities we don't have time for, or that are going to require us taking time away from something we should be doing. You know, there are a lot of things in this world that we do not have control over. How we spend our time is one of the things that we do. And I know what you're thinking. Nope, I got to go to work, don't have a choice. You have a choice. It's a choice I would highly recommend that you make, but it is in fact a choice. Time is one of the few resources that you have control over. And I'm going to tell you this, the older I get, the more it becomes true. It is your most valuable resource. It is literally priceless. No amount of money can buy you one more second on this earth. And time is a unique resource in that you can't make it, but you can spend it. You may not have any control over the number of days that you get. And the Bible tells us that they are numbered. But you do have control in how those days are spent. I had somebody tell me something years ago that it has always stuck with me. That every single time you say yes to something, you say no to something else. Make sure you're saying yes to the right things. What unrealistic expectations do you have of your time and how you can spend it? Our unreasonable expectations are the ones that I call my selfish expectations. And this is when we become the person expecting someone else to play a part in a play we wrote. You know, it's easy to become the person with the expectations. You know, I've often found that when we are that person, we don't know we're that person. Sometimes our self-awareness is, Can you honestly ask yourself, what pressures are you putting on other people to be and do and say to meet your expectations? Are you inviting and welcoming people because they're loved and wanted? Or are you telling others how they're expected to perform because it's what you need and want? You know, unreasonable and selfish expectations, we know that they lead to resentment, they lead to broken relationships. We know what it feels like, right, when someone directs that at us. So why do we do it? This is nothing more than another form of codependency. If it looks a certain way, if it feels a certain way, if they'll do, say, and be a certain thing, then I will feel a certain way. If it's okay, I'm okay. If I can orchestrate this perfect setting and situation, Christmas will be right. I will feel good. What unreasonable, selfish expectations are you putting on others? A lot of us also struggle with unhealthy expectations. And this is a hard one because this is where a lot of our grief, our regret, our longing kind of lives. This is where we place so much importance on things looking like what we envision that no other version is good enough. For me, it's been past versions that hit so hard. It's missing that person, that piece, and it's feeling like because nothing will be like that again, then nothing will be quite right again. It's the idea that the good days, that the best days are the ones behind us. And that all I can do is grieve them. Grief is weird. I got stuck for a long time in a place where I didn't want anything to change. Everything had to look exactly the same. Exactly the same. But I didn't want anybody else doing the things that Dad did because that was his space. But we had to do them because things had to be exactly the same. There's no win in there. It sounds silly, but that the first time that hit me was my parent. I love my parents, y'all, but I did not get this way on accident. So my parents are very, they plan. And so we have a running joke in our house. We fry our turkey that we start at the time you want to eat, and we calculate backwards to the minute. Because it has to cool a certain amount of time, cook a certain amount of time. That oil has to heat up a certain amount of time. You got to wash that turkey, dry that turkey, salt and pepper that turkey. There's a lot of steps. And if you want this done on time, and I remember, oh God, my kids remember. It's so funny, like just watching my parents listening to a debate. I mean, down to the minute. That was hilarious. And I remember the first year that they didn't do that. And I was so grateful that my husband was willing to put up with all of our insanity and fry that stupid turkey. But I didn't want him to fry that turkey. That piece wasn't right. Some of you look back on the past and you're not struggling with the longing for it like I am. You're struggling with the regret of what every Christmas looked like that it shouldn't have. The things you did, the things that were done to you. You don't know how to have a healthy expectation of what should happen at Christmas. You don't have memories. In fact, you're missing something that you never had. And it is perfectly reasonable to feel that grief, to feel that longing. It's healthy to acknowledge it, to talk about it, to remember these people that we lost, to talk about what we wish we had had. But what isn't okay is when our expectations are so wrapped up in what can't be that we can't appreciate what is. When we are so disappointed in what things don't look like or who isn't here, that we miss the blessing of everything that is. That if we can't have that picture we have in our mind, that we can't acknowledge that anything else could be good. Unhealthy expectations lead us down the road where no matter how good our reality is, we are always searching for something that isn't real. I have a picture in my house that is very, very important to me. About 10 years ago, my dad went out and bought a full Santa suit. I mean, top to bottom. Y'all's got boot covers, and there was a bag, and I don't know why we needed this. I don't even know what we've done with it, but we have it. Should anybody need a Santa suit? And one year we were out. I don't know what we were doing. My parents broke in our house, and my dad dressed up as Santa, and my mom took pictures of him like putting presents under the tree and putting things in the stocking. They didn't tell anybody. And they had them printed and they had them framed, and they gave them to the kids for Christmas. And what really stands out to me is I know what my dad brought into those Christmases. He lost his father to suicide when he was 12. He was much older than his little brother, and he acted more as a parent than he did as a sibling. And as an adult, he lost his younger brother to suicide. And I knew that the baggage that he carried into these holidays was heavy. But what I learned from all of these things, and what sits with me every time I see this picture, was not to miss the joy and the peace and the wonder of the Christmas that is right here because of the ones that are behind me. And see, guys, these unrealistic, these unhealthy, these unreasonable expectations, we struggle with because we're trying to satisfy a need. We're trying to fill a longing that every one of us has inside of ourselves for connection, for love, to matter. That's where a lot of our struggles come from, right? We got a Jesus-sized hole right here inside that we try to fill with everything else. Drugs, alcohol, people, money. None of it works. And I want to tell you, as we go through this holiday season, we talk about these expectations, that hole's not shaped like a Christmas tree either. Even if you could make what you just envisioned in your mind the perfect reality, there'd still be something missing. Because all the things we love about the holidays, they are not Christmas. They're wonderful and they're joyful, but they aren't Christmas. We're going to close our eyes again, but I want you guys to stand with me. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord showed around them, and they were afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which will be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you, that you'll find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of heavenly hosts, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace and goodwill toward men. And that is Christmas. And if we could let go of all the unrealistic, unreasonable, unhealthy expectations and just simply rejoice in the promise that is Christmas. We have a Savior who loves us, who came to save us. And what if we replaced all of those expectations with an expectation of His presence and His love? What if that picture in our head focused on building our relationship with Him and sharing that love with others? No strings attached, no expectations, just loving other people the way that He loves us. That cannot be taken away. That expectation won't be unmet. If we reach out, He will meet us right where we are. And that's what I want to challenge you with tonight. The altars are open. We're going to close out together. But every one of us in here has some expectation that we have carried around that is weighing us down. And I don't want to see anybody in this room just cope and make it through. What if you had the courage to let it go? Let it go. Release that expectation. And just expect that He'll show up. Because I promise you, He will. The altars are open.